From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
This week, it's been a showing of love and loathing for Governor Lincoln Chafee. His stance on in-state tuition for undocumented immigrants has been polarizing, and his offhand suggestion that illegals could also get licenses has created a firestorm when there is already a lot on the horizon. Next week, he and the General Treasurer are slated to unveil their pension reform plan, and if that isn't enough, there are growing signs the U.S. economy is teetering on the edge of a double-dip recession. Bad news for a state that still hasn't recovered from the last one. Our guest this week on Newsmakers, the governor for the state of Rhode Island, Lincoln Chafee.
Good morning. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Joining me on the panel, WPRI.com reporter Ted Nisi and political reporter for Rhode Island Public Radio, Ian Donis. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Governor. Thank you for joining us. As I said in the open there, we certainly have much to discuss. Immigration, medical marijuana, another thing on the table. But I do want to begin with pensions because next week could be an important one for the future of the retirement system. The time is now for the people at home, the people watching this, to understand what it's going to look like. What are the key elements to the pension reform proposal coming that is supposed to come out this month?
Well, as I talked in the campaign, and what the federal government has had since the 80s is a hybrid plan.
For who?
That's going to be for teachers, state workers, what they call the municipal MERS plan. And so that's an element of what we're putting together.
When I say who, I'm wondering if this is going to mean a hybrid plan for vested employees, those who have 10 years in the plan.
Well, the details are still being worked out, but
the details are being worked out.
Yes, they sure are. They sure are.
This is going to come out next week, right?
Yeah, but I'm not going to give you all the details today.
Why not?
Because we still have a week, and we're still working with the legislative leaders. It's got to get through the Senate. It's got to get through the House.
Can we expect we will see it next week, Governor?
Yes, I think we're on track. Somewhere close to next week. That's our goal.
Well, keep going about the other elements of the plan.
Age of retirement is a big issue. We're having to deal with that. At the same time, not having a flood of valuable state employees to have good institutional knowledge head for the doors because of changes we might make. We just can't afford that. And then the big one's the COLA. That's really the big one.
And what would that look like?
Well, as the Treasurer has said, and I'm sure you've heard, some kind of suspension of the COLA until we get the fund at a certain level of solvency.
These are much more dramatic steps than you were talking about months back, Governor, and I know your position on this has evolved partly as the numbers have changed significantly since you were running last year, but could you talk a little about the evolution of your own thinking on what Rhode Island needs to do about the pension system?
Yes, a big decision was when the Retirement Board made the change in the assumptions from 8.25 in percent in return on our investments. Yes, down to 7.5. That changed our unfunded liability. That changed a lot. And also the mortality tables were changed at that Retirement Board meeting, people living longer. So these were good decisions, but they changed the depth of the problem.
And they forced you to reevaluate what should be done in terms of policy?
Yes.
Governor, a letter that you sent with Treasurer Raimondo to state workers recently said that taxpayers will continue to need to be part of the solution to the pension problem. So are new taxes on the table as part of your approach to dealing with this crisis?
Where the taxpayers are going to pick up their side of the burden is we're looking at re-amortizing, and that adds a cost to the taxpayers.
What percentage of the problem do you plan to use re-amortization to address?
Well, once again, I can't give you all the details. We're still working on that, but that these are some of the broad aspects of the reforms we're going to be recommending.
Some say, and possibly even yourself, that it is not reform unless municipal pensions are addressed. What kind of municipal pension reform are we going to see in this, if any?
Particularly, Governor, the locally run plans you've talked about a lot, which aren't in the state-managed system.
You're hitting the nail on the head, and as bad as the state plan is, some of these independent municipal plans are way worse than the state plan. We're talking about the state at 48%. Some of these are down at 11%, 17%, in deep trouble. And a real iceberg the ship's heading for these independent plans that are totally unfunded. So I'm insisting, I've been a dogged insister, that in our reforms we include what we call the non-MERS municipal pension funds. The MERS are some municipal funds are overseen by the state. That's called the MERS plans. But the non-MERS out there are real icebergs. And so I'm insisting that the reforms that we enact include those independent plans. This is really important.
What is that reform then?
Well, we're working on it, but COLAs are a big part of it.
Do you understand how people are just going to
COLAs are cost of living adjustments, as everybody knows.
Are probably at home getting frustrated listening to you now. Oh, well, we're working on it. We're working on it. We'll let you know. We'll let you know. I mean, this is an opportunity here, Governor, a platform. Everyone watching this show, taxpayers or people receiving benefit checks, are going to be affected by this. The time is now, isn't it, to understand what this reform is going to look like? And we're still hearing ambiguity from the governor of the state of Rhode Island.
Everybody wants immediate gratification, and on the same token, haste makes waste. And we want a good reform proposal that's comprehensive, so don't come back in 2 years, come back in 3 years. We want a good comprehensive proposal that covers the non-MERS independent plans and can get through the Senate, get through the House, and that's what we're working on hard.
Let me ask you then,
every day we're working on it. We'll be working on it today.
Run plans, Governor.
So in the end, whether it's a week from now, we have a good proposal.
The Treasurer has said she's concerned about sort of the scope of what you can do at the state level, because by definition those are locally run plans. And Dan Beardsley, who's a lobbyist for the cities and towns, has said to us perhaps something could be done with collective bargaining. But I know, as you said, you've been a dogged advocate for changes. You had your mast fund proposal that didn't pass, that was supposed to work on that. The General Assembly didn't go for it. What are you looking at, or what are you proposing that's looked at as they try to figure out what can be done for locally run plans?
Yeah, the big one is violating collective bargaining. That's really what we have to navigate, and you mentioned that in your question. And so I think we can do it legally and without violating collective bargaining.
Governor, are you concerned that if the pension approach does not include the locally administered pensions, that other communities will go the way of Central Falls and have that really kind of severe fiscal distress?
Yes, and that's not good for union members. So that's our message to the unions, police and fire in particular, saying communities could go the way of Central Falls. The state can't, but a Coventry could say, we're just going to declare bankruptcy and just slash all these retirement benefits in half. And that's not good.
To bring the question back to the issue of the hybrid approach as part of the solution, if that includes a 401k plan, how will the state make sure that public employees who make poor investment choices don't wind up jeopardizing their retirement security going forward?
Well, as I said, the federal government has had this since the 80s. Every federal employee is in a hybrid plan. And the freedom, the liberty you have to invest your own 401k is very limited. You can have a medium risk, it's somewhat risky, but it's very limited. You just can't put it in Foxwoods.
Governor, in an interview with me in July, you told me, quote, if we lose these court cases...
I should say Twin Rivers, to keep it in Rhode Island.
That's right. Good save. You told me, quote...
Newport Grand, got to cover all bases.
We lose these court cases where we cannot take away benefits for present retirees, we're really in a pickle. Well, here we are. I guess we're in that pickle, right? And now you have to ask, you have asked the state Supreme Court to look at it. What happens if they rule against the state? What then?
Oh, boy. Well, we're back to square one.
Which is?
Which is high cost for the taxpayer to fund these plans, working with the unions to have some kind of concessions.
It would be very difficult.
It would be very difficult.
And how long do you think?
I said we would be in a pickle, and I meant it.
If this legal process could drag out for...
Yes, we've gone to the Supreme Court just this week, hoping to expedite it.
But that's of course, for the, 2009 pension reform? We're looking...
Yes, that sets a good precedent, though.
Okay.
The whole contract issue and the public good aspect.
An 80% funding level is considered a hallmark of a healthy pension. What is your minimum requirement for this approach as far as raising the state's level of current funding toward that 80% mark?
A good question. Where is that number that you're going to put the health of a pension fund? And we're working on that. What's a good number?
Can you? Oh, come on, Governor. Can't you be more specific than that?
Well, you start at 80%, but then you factor in realities of what we can get. And
some people might really question whether this approach is just going to nibble at the problem rather than fundamentally solving it.
No, it's not going to nibble. No, it's not going to do that. We've invested too much effort and energy. We're not going to be back in 2014 doing this again.
We've talked a lot about policy, wonky stuff on the pensions, but it's people who get those pension checks. And I know you and Treasurer Raimondo had a private meeting last night with members of Council 94. Can you sort of characterize what you heard from those? Those are people who would be affected by this, what you heard and what you took away from that?
Well, to be honest, this was a standing room only crowd of municipal employees and state workers under Council 94, AFSCME workers, and big crowd. And I expected to be a real fury in there, but it was very sober. They know the economy we're in out there, and I came away very surprised that they're really listening to what we were saying about COLAs and about age of retirements, some of these key issues that are going to affect them, but they also know their neighbors out there are really hurting, and this economy is putting a lot of stress and anger into people, and we all might have to make some concessions. And it was a good meeting, a really good meeting last night with those union employees, those state workers and municipal workers.
If that was the tone you got from those workers, labor leaders have been hammering you for saying you've gone back on campaign trail promises. In your view, is there a disconnect between leadership and then the membership of these unions?
No, I don't think so. This is a process. And we've been working hard with the labor leaders. They're listening to their constituents. They certainly were listening last night at that meeting. And we're really working hard to pull on the oars together in this process.
What level of obligation do you feel to the public employee unions that were strong supporters of your campaign last year?
My obligation is to make sure they have retirement security, their members have retirement security. And that's our goal.
Governor, a lot of people have wondered what your relationship with Treasurer Raimondo is like. Obviously, you won't want to get into this, but people wonder whether she can run against you in 2014, but also that she brought pensions onto the table. She pushed that retirement board vote, and this has been a policy priority of hers, and you have stood with her ever since that report came out in March. In May. Could you sort of characterize how you two have worked together and what it's been like to work with the treasurer?
Yes, by virtue of her office as a general treasurer, she's chair of the retirement board, so she oversees the pension funds. That's all general treasurers do, Nancy Mayer and Paul Tavares and Frank Caprio. That's their job, to oversee the pension fund. And so she's the natural leader in this area, but it's an issue that was brought up at every stop in the campaign, every Channel 12 debate. Pensions were a big issue. And so we're very involved, the two of us, working with Speaker Fox, Helio, in the chair of the Finance Committee, and on the other side, Teresa Paiva-Weed, and Dan DuPont on the chair of the Finance Committee on the Senate side. So we're all working together, and our relationship, the Treasurer and mine, is very good.
You don't resent that she kind of forced pensions so firmly onto the agenda?
Oh, no. We've got to confront it, and we work well together. Personally, we get along well, too. We enjoy our time, I think, together.
In terms of relationships with other aspects of state government, what have your conversations been like with Speaker Fox and Senate President Paiva-Weed about getting this pension reform done, and about how they will bring along members of their respective chambers who might balk at some of the reforms that you and Raimondo will be proposing?
Well, that's why I want to have conversations early on, so there's no surprises. And so we've all been involved early on and trying to guide this and navigate this to a conclusion that's good for the taxpayers and good for the retirees.
Before we go to break, I want to wrap up the pension discussion here. Address what the labor leaders have accused you of doing, which is breaking your campaign trail promises. Do you feel you've done that, or at least changed your view somewhat since then?
Well, I talked over and over again about a hybrid system. I think I was the first one, because as a federal employee, I lived it. I was in that system, and so that's what we've got.
But you have to say you talked about it not for the workers who are already past 10 years and firmly entrenched in the system, in fairness to them and what they heard from you.
Yes, and I've had to work with the treasurer, I've had to work with the union leaders, I've had to work with the Speaker of the House, the Senate President,
so
the
that
leader
is
of the
a change,
finance
then.
committees. That's natural. That's what happens. My preference might have been different from where we're going to go in the beginning, but you have to sometimes compromise in politics.
Governor Lincoln Chafee is our guest this week on Newsmakers. When we come back, we're going to dive into the firestorm of immigration. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. To my right, WPRI.com reporter Ted Nisi and Ian Donis from Rhode Island Public Radio. Our guest this week is Governor Lincoln Chafee. Governor, I want to talk about in-state tuition for undocumented immigrants. More procedurally, you were critical of Governor Don Carcieri's executive order on immigration, yet procedurally, you did the same thing to promote your agenda. You did an end run around the General Assembly. Why is it not okay for Governor Carcieri, but it's okay for Governor Chafee?
Well, I was critical of the policy, not the issuance of an executive order. The policy, us joining only 6 states to stir up something that I didn't think was necessary in Rhode Island. It didn't help our economy, obviously. We have one of the worst unemployment rates in the country, so it didn't work, and it stirred up a lot of resentment amongst our population.
But why did you do it the way you did it? Every other state in the country, I believe, that has passed in-state tuition.
Not Oklahoma.
Okay, then beside Oklahoma, has gone through the legislative process. What did you do that because you just knew it would fail?
No, I would argue that going through the legislative process to address tuition issues in Rhode Island College, Community College of Rhode Island, and URI is the end around. Go to the legislature to do tuition issues? That just doesn't occur. It's done in the Board of Governors. All tuition decisions for 20 years at RIC, at URI, and CCRI have been made at the Board of Governors. That's where it's done. The end around is the General Assembly.
How do you respond to your critics who say that offering this in-state tuition for undocumented students is effectively sending a message and a reward that illegal immigration is okay?
For all my critics on this issue, I wish on the talk shows and on the editorial page of the Journal, I wish they'd just pick up the phone and call Utah, who has a very liberal immigration policy. Utah, in which they give in-state tuition, in which they have a driver's permit system and have had for a number of years, and ask them, is it working? And from what I hear, I was in Salt Lake City for a governor's conference in July, they say it's working. They get unsafe drivers to have driver's tests, they have eye tests, they get insurance, they pay they generate revenue because they have to pay to get this permit. And in-state tuition, it's not a sanctuary state from what they told me, and it's getting an educated population. It's working. And we just can't bury our head in the sand. There are undocumented people in Rhode Island. That's just a reality.
Isn't the fact that this is really offering a benefit to the children of people who have come into the country illegally?
We can't help that. It's just a reality. I wish there were no undocumented people in Rhode Island, but I can't close my eyes to reality. They're here.
Did you talk to...
I voted for the McCain-Kennedy bill, which addressed the borders, had money to do more on our borders. I'm still a supporter of some kind of comprehensive immigration reform that gets a path to citizenship and seals our borders. The McCain-Kennedy had people learning English. It was a good bill. It didn't pass, but that's what we need.
We were talking about the General Assembly. Did you talk to Speaker Fox and Senate President Paiva-Weed before this decision was taken by the Board of Governors?
Certainly talked about this during the campaign. Again, this is
an issue. You said that to me it's very important that you had a good relationship with the General Assembly, and now this was it made in the executive branch instead of with the legislature.
We've had many conversations. I don't know whether they gave any kind of approval or disapproval on this, but they certainly knew where I stood.
Mm-hmm. Governor, with everything happening right now, we spent the entire first half of this program talking about pensions. I wonder, hindsight being 2020, right, if you think it was a mistake to bring up the possibility, it was almost an offhand comment, of providing licenses for illegal immigrants. Has that become a distraction?
Well, for those that go into the Hispanic community, we know that this is such a big issue. It's brought up at every appearance before a Latino audience. If I go on Latino radio, it comes up every time. It's what can you do about those people that are driving, that don't have insurance, they're not paying, and so that's just a reality that if you're talking and communicating with the Latino population, that's a huge issue.
But it did set off a firestorm.
Yes, but all I say is we can't bury our heads in the sand.
But Governor, I wonder, when the licenses issue came up, I know it was just, I think, an offhand remark you made to a journal reporter answering a question, and we do appreciate when politicians answer our questions. On the other hand, one reason people don't always is because it can put something onto the agenda that wasn't expected. Do you think that sometimes your candor, I know that's always been how you are in politics, but that can cause trouble for you in terms of governing and for your administration?
Shame on me for being honest.
Governor, we know a lot of Rhode Islanders continue to struggle with the economy. What's your explanation for why Rhode Island has had this decades-long struggle to improve its economy, and how much improvement can we expect from your administration in creating jobs over the next 1, 2, 3 years?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. Why does Rhode Island lag behind our neighbors? Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire. Why do we lag behind our neighbors who have the same type of demographics in some cases, same type of energy costs, same labor costs, same environmental issues? And that's the question. And I've said during the campaign, I've said consistently, we have to take our assets and make them work better for us. We have to have a good budget that gives companies a sense of some certainty and stability in Rhode Island. And then corruption's an issue in Rhode Island, and we are cleaning it up. And so I've talked about those ABCs, having our assets work for us, whether it's the 195 corridor that we've opened up in the Knowledge District, the Station District in Warwick, where we've put the Amtrak line and the airport connected, Quonset, tourism, make them work for us.
Are you bringing enough urgency to the issue?
It's number one. There's nothing else than having our people get back to work.
Governor,
it's unacceptable that we lag behind our neighbors. There's no reason. We should be in the forefront. Rhode Island.
You have angered supporters of legalized marijuana by pulling back on the compassion centers. You've upset unions by your support of some changes to the pension system, and you have really angered the conservative base here in Rhode Island for your stance on in-state tuition, the licensing thing we talked about. So I think it's faster to ask who is on your side.
Well, these questions, now we're talking about the medical marijuana, compassion centers, immigration, but everything pales next to Ian's question about getting the economy going. I mean, you can't ignore the issues that are out there, whether it's the compassion centers that I inherited, that was a bill passed by the legislature before I took office, or whether immigration and dealing with some of that, fixing Central Falls.
Yeah, but the question is, do you
the
feel
DMV,
alone
the
on an island
Department of
right
Motor
now,
Vehicles?
Governor?
No, I don't. We're fixing things in Rhode Island. Just mentioned the DMV. We're down from 5-hour wait to an hour and a half. Central Falls, we're fixing that. Pensions, we're fixing. We're trying to get our economy going. Just got back from Pittsburgh on Tuesday. So the key thing is getting our people back to work. Everything else will pale if we can get our economy going. All the other issues will pale in comparison to getting our economy going. And that's really what 99.9% of our focus is.
You mentioned before one important thing is the budget. We knew going into last year's budget what your big policy proposal was going to be, the 1% extra sales tax, because you felt we needed revenue as well as on the spending side. What are you thinking about in terms of policy priorities going into your next budget that'll come out this winter?
Well, I don't want to be too stubborn, but I do think that broadening and lowering the sales tax is a good idea. It provides revenue stability in Rhode Island. And my proposal brought the sales tax down to 6%. Yes, it did broaden it in some areas, but that provides us some stability and lowers our sales tax. It gives us better rankings when they rank Rhode Island. They just look at that 7% and give us a bad ranking. Now, mind all our exemptions. And so that would change our ranking at these national...
You have to admit the Assembly didn't seem very interested in that.
But I don't want to be too stubborn, but I do think it's a good policy decision to broaden and lower your sales tax. Down to 6%. That's a good thing. Those national rankings would then rank us higher, even though we've now broadened it to some other areas.
What is your administration doing to keep Bank of America from pulling out of downtown Providence when its lease expires there in 2 years, potentially taking hundreds of jobs out of the core of the city?
Well, Mayor Tavares and I sent a letter to the CEO of Bank of America, who's on the Brown Corporation board, the corporation, and we expect him to be here in the end of October when the corporation meets, and saying if he has time, we'd like to meet with him, requesting a meeting and talking about the commitment to Rhode Island.
Do you support tolls?
Where it all started with Fleet here in Rhode Island.
Do you support tolls on the Mount Hope Bridge?
Well, after this taping, we have a meeting on that, and I don't like to zigzag in policy, and it seems to me we just took the tolls down, and I like consistency.
And what? Go ahead, Dave.
I was just going to say you had your staff retreat this week. What do you think your administration needs to work on now going forward? What was really the top line things you talked about?
Well, as I said, getting our people back to work, that's really
But I'm wondering
All the
about how your
departments-
administration works. You're the governor, you're in charge of a staff, you're managing them. In terms of how you guys run the government and you run your department.
Well, not only do we have to
30
look
seconds,
at
Governor.
a big, broad policy decisions, but also I begged or I instructed or pleaded with our directors to take care of the little things. And I pointed to the Amtrak clock and at the train station. It really bothered me that as a symbol of Rhode Island, a gateway to Rhode Island, the Amtrak station in Providence, the clock didn't work. And I bugged the Amtrak people until they fixed it. So sometimes the little things go a long way, and even in each of our departments, fix the little things as well as look at the big policy.
Governor Lincoln
decisions.
Chafee, we are out of time on Newsmakers. Thank you very much for joining us this week. And if you're an Ian Donis fan like myself, you keep in mind that Rhode Island Public Radio is switching. If you listen to them on 1290 AM, make the big switch to 88.1 FM so you can continue to listen to Ian Donis. You've been watching Newsmakers. If you missed any of it, catch it on our website, WPRI.com. For Ian Donis, Ted Nisi, I'm Tim White. We'll see you next time.